Smoke and Mirrors Radio Hour with me, Jay Weidner. I am Jay Weidner, and you are listening. Tonight we're going to have a really good guest, someone who's extremely entertaining and knowledgeable, and we want to put him up to be Obama's medical advisor, and then possibly we could get some sense out of what's going on in the world today. So we have an old friend of mine. His name is Steve Oakley. And he can take complex things and word them so they're understandable to people like us. And that's why I appreciate him. And so welcome, Steve.
Thank you, Jay. You're very kind. What a nice introduction.
Well, tell me about this thing that everybody, Louis Farrakhan came out and said that H1N1 is some kind of thing that's going to kill tons of people, and there's a lot of panic in the kind of the alternative news people. What do you think's really going on here?
Well, indeed, I heard that today as well. And another thing that came out today was a CBS special report suggesting that things don't look as dire as what had first been believed. Indeed, the stats that they turned up, which they could not get from the CDC, who said that they had to review the stats that were coming in from the states before they released them. So CBS went ahead and obtained their own statistics. In California, for instance, 13,000 specimens have been taken from people with the alleged flu, and only 2%, or 296 of those cases, turned out to be H1N1. In Florida, 17%, Alaska, 11%, Georgia, 2%. So, at this point, one has to wonder, where's the flu?
Is it conspiracy or is it idiocy?
Well, they often seem to go together, and in this case, the rabbit hole gets very, very, very deep. I think the basic question to ask is, what is the flu? When people become ill and are at this point becoming very alarmed, ending up in emergency rooms and schools are being shut down, what's going on here? I mean, the WHO as well came out a few weeks ago, and they also said that it did not look like it was going to come to be what they had predicted. And they also revealed at that time, Jay, an interesting thing, which is that in July, they actually stopped doing any testing and are only basing these numbers on a certain set of symptoms. And the symptoms are fever, cough, sore throat, and headache. Gosh, did you ever have anything that felt like that before? Like a cold,
yesterday.
Maybe?
Yes.
So, and even in the local hospital, that's been confirmed as well. I checked on that, and that's indeed the way that they're viewing it. And so if those are your complaints, then...
Wait a minute. People have had those symptoms forever. I mean, since the beginning of the human race.
Yeah, I think you're right. So that, I guess, leads me to the next point, which is this question of testing. And John Rappaport has done some remarkable research about this. And so what's the test? When somebody says, well, we tested it. And so, first of all, we see here that they're not testing. But on occasion, they evidently are testing. It's alleged to be about a $300 test, and that's probably the main reason why it's not often being done, or at least a reason. I think there's a bigger main reason. So that the test that is being done, if it is done, is something called a PCR, or a polymerase chain reaction test. And that is a test that, through sophisticated equipment, manages to really blow up a small amount of genetic material as might be taken from a swab, and then examined for what's found there. And when I say blow up, I mean in extraordinary proportions. It really has to be magnified in a remarkable way through a sophisticated process in order to see what they're looking for. And so then they find whatever they find. and make a certain declaration regarding what that is. And it occurs to me that when a person gets sick, they don't have a little piece of genetic debris somewhere in a recess of their body, but they got taken over. And yet this test is what's required to discover the H1N1.
So like it's the needle in the haystack, and so it can't be as pervasive in the body as they seem to be saying.
Well, but people are getting sick. You've been ill with a bad cold. Is there a difference, by the way, between a cold and the flu?
I couldn't tell, actually. I did have one of the most vile illnesses I've had in years in April, and I couldn't tell you. No. My ears rang, which is I always thought was a flu syndrome, but other than that, no. I was just ill, just sick, just sneezing and sore throat, and it was awful. I never want to get that again.
And we've all had those horrible illnesses, and we've all had a cold that lasted for, a few hours or a day or two. And it's curious to me. I think the question needs to be asked is, what's the difference? And that just, really presupposes the question about what's illness. How do we
I want to get to that. That's really the reason that I'm having you on, because Steve has a historical evidence as well as physical evidence for a different approach to sickness and ill health, and I want to get to that. But first, I just want to finish off this H1N1 vaccine. Are you getting it?
Well, there's no chance, and I'll tell you part of the reason why not. In 1976, I was working in an office building, and a friend of mine approached me, and Gerald Ford, of course, was promoting the swine flu vaccine for every single American. The vaccine had been funded, had been manufactured, and was being manufactured, and my friend Scott wanted me to go down the street with him and get the vaccine. I said, there's not a chance. I'm not interested. And he said, no, you don't get it. It's free. And I said, hey, there is no amount of money that they could pay me to go down there and get that vaccine. And so he said, whatever. And he took off. And a couple days later, I heard that he was not doing well. Indeed, he was hospitalized. Actually, the next time I saw him was a couple of years later, when he called to me in a garbled voice in a way that I could barely understand that he was saying my name. I turned, and here was this guy who was barely recognizable as a quadriplegic in a wheelchair. One of the statistics as a result of the so-called Guillain-Barré outbreak that was subsequent to the swine flu of 1976. He was a very wealthy man. There was a large settlement, unlike what's possible today. Today, of course, they've got blanket immunity from any prosecution. But in those days, you could still sue the vaccine makers, which he and many others did in a class action suit. And so he was able to wheel around with garbled speech and quadriplegic in his electric wheelchair with a lot of money in the bank.